In this tutorial, we are going to go over 6 easy methods for painting different colored skies. So let's dive right into it. First, we're going to paint an easy watercolor blue sky, and we're just going to fit all of these in on this little page. So I'm going to start with the wet on wet technique and start with a wet wash of clean water. And in this blue sky, we are going to have a few clouds, and I'm going to show you how to paint that. But first, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see a little better. Okay, so I'm going to be using Prussian blue for this blue sky. And as we're painting, we have this wet wash. And as we're painting, just kind of picture where you think the clouds might be and just kind of slightly paint around them. So this is one of my favorite methods using the wet on wet technique, because the wet of the water and the paint makes it so the clouds don't have any dried paint lines, right? So they're still kind of blending kind of seamlessly into the sky here, but you can still leave the white space behind. And if you have a little too much water and your paint just kind of runs over and gets rid of your white clouds, that's okay. You can use a clean paintbrush to kind of push away the pigment and leave some of these white spaces behind for these white clouds. And they don't have to be perfect. This is loose watercolor. That is definitely my style, a loose watercolor style. So we're just kind of trying to keep these pockets of white space amidst the blue. So once again, we started with the blue and a wet wash, and then just painted around some of these white spaces and used a clean brush to kind of push the pigment away from these pockets of blue. And then I'm going to take just a little bit more blue and finish out the sky, carefully painting again just around like the bottom of this cloud here, and then painting down to the bottom of this sky. And at the end of this video, we're going to finish all of these little mini paintings, including adding subjects along the bottom of these skies so that we can all bring them together. But this is how to paint a blue sky. I have this weird little pocket of pigment that I picked up from my palette. I'm not really sure what's going on, so I'm just blending it in there. And we're good to go. So that's a blue cloudy sky. Next up, let's talk about how to paint a monochrome night sky. So I'm going to get my paper wet again, just a little spot, so I can paint this little monochrome night sky. And I'm getting it wet, and then for my night sky, I think I'm going to do some of this perylene violet. Perylene violet is like a burgundy, red, purple kind of color. That's one of my favorites. So I am getting some dense pigment. It's really wet. My paint is really wet and my paper is really wet. And I'm moving from edge to edge, all the way across, all the way down, until the paint slowly comes off of my paintbrush. And so we're creating a monochrome gradient, meaning we're shifting from one color to the next in a seamless kind of shift, and monochrome meaning it's just one color. So once I have added that first layer, I'm going to go back in with even denser pigment, so there's a lot more paint on here, just to make the top darker, because the contrast between the dark and the light is really what makes these monochrome night skies so breathtaking and really awesome. So I'm just adding dark up here and then painting down. And one thing to note is I don't want to accidentally paint the bottom of this night sky too dark. So about halfway through, after my second or third layer, I'm gonna wash off my paintbrush so I only have clean water and start painting upward from the bottom. And I'm moving in this edge to edge motion, and moving from the bottom will make sure that I can still blend the different layers of color together without accidentally getting the bottom of my night sky too dark. So that is my method for painting this monochrome night sky. My quick and dirty method for painting a monochrome night sky. And then if you want the top of your sky to be even darker, then just add darker paint. You can even add, if you want, like a dark Payne's gray or a dark indigo at the top to get it to be slightly darker. At that point, it's not quite monochrome anymore, but because you added a different color, but it would still look pretty cool. Next, we are going to paint another gradient, but this time we're going to paint a sunset gradient. We're going to paint a couple sunset gradients actually. And this one, we're going to do some like dark and moody colors. So we're going to start with a clean wash of water, and then I'm going to pick up some red orange, and I'm going to paint with some red orange from the bottom, and I'm going to paint up so that the bottom of my sky is this dark orange here. And then I'm going to add some pink in the middle. And as I add pink, because this is wet, the color is going to blend up and down, but I'm going to do some manual blending as well. So I'm going to blend down and back up so that there's kind of like this seamless shift between the red, orange, and the pink. And I'm going to add a little bit more. So this is Quin Rose, by the way, the pink color. And then I'm going to add a little bit more Quin Rose and paint upward so that I can blend into the sky this way. And finally, the last color we're going to add is more of this Perylene Violet, and it'll be right at the top here. And I'm just going to blend it down into the pink. And so this is kind of like a darker, still with warm colors, but a darker, moodier sunset, so it's like maybe nearing the end, right? And as I paint this down, some of the violet might overtake like the pink and the orange, and so I'm just going to keep adding the different colors and blending them in, either by blending up or blending down, so that I can maintain this smooth gradient. So the next sky we're doing is another night sky, and this time we are going to paint some northern lights in this sky. So I'm just going to once again start with a clean wash of water down here in my paper, and then I'm going to take some indigo paint and paint at the top. So indigo is like a dark blue, and just start painting from the top. And I'm only going to go down a little bit because the paint is going to blend itself together. The water is going to help the paint blend into the paper without much of my help. And I'm going to add a different color at the bottom of this to help encourage the northern lights. So after about 2/3 of this little mini painting has some indigo, and it's created a natural gradient because it's dark at the top, then I'm going to take some yellow green, some light green, and just kind of push it. So the paper is still wet, but I'm going to push it upward. And while the paper is still wet, if I push it upward and kind of just let the paint blend into itself, it's going to create a nice, cool little northern lights texture. And so this one, like I said, is pretty easy. It's just starting with a blue sky, dark blue indigo sky for the top half, and then pushing yellow green or light green up into the blue while it's still wet, so it blends together naturally in this kind of method. And so that is sky number 4, and let's move on to the next one. We're gonna do one more night sky. This time it's going to be a night sky with kind of like a night sky sunset, but still the sky, almost like a galaxy. I'm gonna stop trying to explain it and just paint. So we're gonna start with indigo again and have some of this like dark blue color coming down, and then basically we're gonna create more of a textured gradient. Instead of like a smooth gradient, it's gonna be slightly more textured. So we're starting with indigo, and then I'm gonna add some perylene violet to indigo. You do not have to use the exact same colors that I'm using. Basically just blue and then purple. And then I'm going to end with a little bit of Quin Rose down at the bottom. And I'm going to blend these up together, but instead of trying to create like a very smooth and seamless gradient, I'm purposefully going to use like a similar technique that we did for the Northern Lights and just kind of push these layers together and to create a more of like a blended texture here. So I don't want it to be really smooth and seamless. I want it to look like all of the colors are kind of intruding in each other's spaces, if that makes sense. And trying to do this is a really excellent practice in just like letting go of control and being able to have your brush kind of wander aimlessly with the different colors and painting wet on wet so that you know the colors will still blend together. They just are going to, it's going to make this more of a rough textured pattern. And this texture in the sky is going to look like clouds, really. So that's kind of what we're going for with this method. And it's possible because of the wet on wet technique. So just kind of keep going until you feel like it looks like a beautiful blended mess, and we will move on to our final sky. Okay, so this sky is one of my favorites, and it can be tricky to master, but I really love it. So it's basically like the sky right before sunset or right after sunrise, where you can still see the blue sky at the top, but just a pale yellow at the bottom. And sometimes you can see like a faint turquoise in between, but other times there's a lot of white in between, so you can barely even tell where the blue and the yellow meet to make green. So instead of keeping explaining, I'm just going to paint this. I'm starting with some Prussian blue after I did that wash of water, and then I'm going to take Naples yellow. Naples yellow is a yellow that is really pale, so you could probably make it by making a tint of lemon yellow, meaning adding white to lemon yellow. The point is I want a really pale yellow. And so I'm going to start from the bottom with the yellow and not quite meet the blue. So I want a little bit of white space between the blue and the yellow. And then I'm going to take some water and just mix these colors. So there's a little bit of green here, but mostly it's just to kind of enhance the blend, the gradual transition from this Naples yellow to blue up here. And then just to kind of enhance the sunrise or sunset aspect of this, I'm going to take even more of this Naples yellow and just create some like sun rays in the blue like that, using like sideways strokes. So I'm kind of making a swoop in the sky just so it looks like the sun is kind of streaming into the sky just like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to look like a mixture of blue and yellow, and I think that we achieved that. So this was the last sky, and now let's go through all of them and add some elements along the bottom so that it turns into a landscape painting. We have these skies now, and I'm going to split them in half and do half of them with one silhouette along the bottom and half the other. So I'm either going to do some trees along the bottom or some mountains. And I'm going to mostly use Payne's Gray, some dark Payne's Gray to paint all of these, and I'm just using my small detail brush for the trees. So I think I'm gonna do trees on the sky, the blue cloudy sky, and then a few other ones. So I'm just going to paint these trees right on top of the sky. And the trees, the sky plus the trees plus some birds, to add just a little bit more texture or elements to this, is one of my favorite, what I like to call landscape recipes. So I think that it can be so hard to know what to paint, especially if you're brand new and you don't know what's okay and what's not. And first of all, I want to say you can do whatever you want. It doesn't really matter who thinks what is okay or not. As long as you're not hurting anybody, you can paint whatever you want. But especially when I first started, it helped to have like a bank of things to paint. And so thinking about these elements that you're learning how to paint trees and learning how to paint skies and learning how to paint other things, and then putting them together in different formats and different variations can be a helpful way to stretch yourself and stretch your creativity so that you can paint things that are unique and unique to you. So as you're painting trees, one thing that I always like to say is just make sure to make them different sizes and different shapes and different, so that you can add some depth and complexity to these pieces. So I'm gonna add trees to, finish adding trees to this one, and then I'm going to add trees to a few more also. Okay, so I added trees to 3 of these, and that rhymes, trees to 3 of these. And now I'm just going to add some stars to a few of them. So this one is definitely a night sky, and sometimes I splatter on white paint to add stars. Sometimes I use a white gel pen like I'm using right now. Just make sure that when you're adding stars with a gel pen, so you're drawing them in manually, you paint the stars like in clusters, because if you paint them, try to like do it one at a time, almost always your mind's automatically going to put them into a pattern, and that's not really how stars go. Also try to make sure to do some that are bigger or smaller than others as much as possible. Sometimes it's tricky with a gel pen because you have to have a lot of control over how much pressure you have in order to get smaller dots, but still something important to note. And then as one final touch to night skies, I like to add a little shooting star off to the side. So that one is for sure a night sky that needed stars. This one is a little iffier because up here it's dark, but it's definitely still sunset. So I might just do like a few stars near the top that are just barely starting to show, but not a whole lot. And now we're going to paint the mountains on the three other skies that we painted. So first, let's tackle this night sky. So I'm just gonna paint one mountain layer, just going across just like this. And I wanna make sure to leave some of the, I'm dipping the mountain on purpose so that I can leave some of the white space, or the light space rather, to show the glow of the night sky behind the mountain. And then another way to accentuate this is to take this beyond just a mountain, and while the mountain is wet, to paint just a few trees into the mountain. Sometimes I do like trees all the way across the mountain layer, and sometimes I just do a little cluster. And I think this time I'm just gonna do just a little cluster of trees, just like along the bottom of this ravine here. Even when I'm doing tiny little clusters though, I always make sure to use different sizes and lengths, etc., and to try to paint them in clusters mostly as much as possible, because that's what makes them look more realistic, I think. So I painted, I think that's fine right there, and then I'm going to finish this off with some more stars like I did in the last one, because this is definitely a night sky. And then I'm gonna have a little shooting star off to the side over here, and I think I'm gonna do 3 shooting stars in this one. So 1 shooting star there, 1 shooting star in another corner, and then 1 down here. There you go. So there is that sky, and then we're gonna add mountains on the other ones as well. So I'm gonna take my size 6 brush again, some Payne's Gray, and for this one, I'm gonna have the mountains be a little peakier. And I'm not gonna have any trees on them. I'm just gonna finish off with this mountain here and call that good for the Northern Lights. The reason that I'm not painting stars in this Northern Lights night sky is because sometimes the Northern Lights are so bright that they like cover up the stars. And if I'm painting stars with gouache, like with paint, then one way that I sometimes paint the stars is to get some really light value paint and splatter on some light stars. But because I'm using gel pen here, I can't really manipulate the value of the stars, so I'm just gonna leave that as is. And then last but not least, we are going to paint another mountain range just across here, and this time I am going to do more trees, and I'm going to do trees along the whole ridge line. So in order to do that, in order to make sure that the trees blend in completely with this mountain layer, I need to make sure the mountain layer is wet all the way before and while I am painting. So I'm making sure to get this wet with water. And then I'm going to use my size 0, this is a 1 actually, my size 1 brush. And instead of painting like individual trees, I'm just going to use the flat edge of my paintbrush to paint little lines jutting out of the mountain layer. And then I'm going to go back and add crisscross lines, horizontal lines, to give those trees even more definition. But I want to paint these lines first so that they can blend into the mountain layer without it drying on me. So this is like one of my tricks to get the look of trees without actually having to individually paint all of the trees. And so now I'm going to go back and using just some thin horizontal lines, I'm going to paint some horizontal lines across. I might even paint in a few more vertical ones, just in case like my horizontal lines cover up my trees or they don't look exactly like I want them to be. But so we can use those initial vertical lines that we made with the paintbrush more as guidelines, if anything, and then add in more texture later. But painting in these horizontal lines is just going to give these trees more texture and look more like trees. But it also is going to save us time because we didn't have to paint each and every individual tree. So there you go, all done. That is my tutorial, concludes my tutorial for 6 easy watercolor skies. We focused mostly on the skies and then only really did 2 elements, 2 trees or mountains and some stars in a couple of them to complete the landscape. But I hope that this has helped show you how painting landscapes doesn't have to be tricky. They can be simple like this and still look beautiful. And so thanks for watching. If you decide that you want to paint one of these and share with your audience or share on your Instagram, please tag me. My handle is thiswritingdesk. I would love to see. And if you want to see more tutorials like this, leave me a comment with any requests, and please subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.